Hey guys, I'm going to have you taking a few notes today, so make sure you have your notebook out and available. You can set up a chart that looks like the one I have here. We're going to be learning how to write proofs soon, which are basically arguments. But since our arguments or our proofs are going to be about math, we need to know some basic like facts or properties that are true in math so we can use them in our arguments. So these are the properties that you should be taking notes on. And remember, when you're taking notes on this, you can pause the video anytime to write things down, because I'll probably go through them kind of fast, but feel free to pause the video. After the video, there is a Desmo slide where you're going to do a matching activity, and you can use your notes for the matching activity. And if the cards on the matching activity are too close together, like too overlapping, if you zoom out on your screen by pressing Control minus, you'll be able to see the cards better. All right, so our first property is the addition property of equality, and you probably learned this one in algebra. This property says that if A equals B, then A plus C equals B plus C. Basically, it's saying you can add the same number to both sides of an equation, and the two sides stay equal. So an example of that would be like this. If x equals y, then you can add 4 to both sides, and they stay equal. So x plus 4 equals y plus 4. So if you need to write that down, you can pause it here. The next property is the subtraction property of equality, and it's very similar to the addition property, except instead of adding to both sides, we're going to be subtracting. So if A equals B, then A minus C equals B minus C, and if x equals y, then x minus 4 equals y minus 4. So instead of adding 4 to both sides, we're subtracting 4 to both sides. Those should be familiar from solving equations in Algebra 1. Feel free to pause it here to write that one down. The next property is the multiplication property of equality. That's also from Algebra 1, and it says that you can multiply both sides of an equation by the same number and the equation stays equal on both sides. So if A equals B, then A times C equals B times C. So they're multiplying both sides of the equation times C. An example of that would be if x equals y, then 4x equals 4y. They're multiplying both sides of the equation by 4. The division property is very similar, but instead of multiplying both sides by a number, we're going to divide both sides by a number. So if A equals B and C is not 0, then A divided by C equals B divided by C. And in this one, C can't be 0 because you're not allowed to divide by 0. And an example of that would be this one. If x equals y and z equals 5, then x divided by 5 equals y divided by 5. Basically saying you can divide both sides of an equation by the same number and it will stay equal. If you need to pause it here to write those down, feel free. The next property should also be familiar from Algebra 1. It's the distributive property. So this one says if A times the quantity B plus C, or no, it says A times the quantity B plus C equals A times B plus A times C. So an example of that, it looks like this. 4 times the quantity x plus 5 equals 4x plus 20. You distribute that 4, which means multiply, through, and this is what you get. All right, the next ones may not be as familiar from Algebra 1. The next one is the substitution property of equality. This says that if A equals B, then A may be replaced by B in any equation or expression. So since they're equal, you can plug in. It's just like when you have a substitute teacher in a class, right? Like if Miss G is going to substitute for me, then she replaces me in my classroom. So if B is going to substitute for A, then B replaces A in an equation or expression. Here's an example. If x equals y, then 5x plus 7 equals 5y minus 7. The y is just substituted in for the x, like Miss G would substitute for me. The next one is the reflexive property of equality. This one just says A equals A. I remember this one by thinking of the reflexive property as like reflection, like looking in a mirror, because it looks like this A is looking in a mirror and seeing itself. That's the reflexive property of equality. An example of that is 7y minus 1 equals 7y minus 1. It's when something is equal to itself. Feel free to pause if you need to write stuff down. The next property is the symmetric property of equality. This one says that if A equals B, then B equals A. So they just switch to the two sides and they're equal. And so an example of this would be if y equals 3x plus 5, then 3x plus 5 equals y. In this case, we just switch the y and the 3x plus 5, and they're still equal to each other. And then finally, we have the transitive property of equality. The transitive property of equality really reminds me of the law of syllogism that we just talked about. It says that if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. So they cut out the B that was in the middle and they went straight from A to C. That's called the transitive property. An example of that would be like this. If W equals X and X equals 2y minus 4, then W equals 2y minus 4. They cut out the X in the middle and just went straight from W to 2y plus 4. I might have said minus 4, but I meant plus 4. So those are all the properties we're going to need to know to write our proofs over the coming week or so. And so make sure you have good notes on these and try the Desmos matching activity that comes after this. And remember, if the Desmos cards are too big and they're overlapping each other so that you can't read them, just zoom out your screen. So use Control- to zoom out and you should be able to see better. Email me if you have any issues or troubles or just need any help. And make sure you like and subscribe.